Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today we're going to talk about the Coast Guard's local notice to mariners. These are extremely helpful and essential information that I think a lot of loopers aren't sure how to interpret, where to find, how to use them, etc. So Rob Rice, who is a frequent guest here, is going to be back today. He's going to talk to us about these local notice to mariners. We'll bring him in just a moment, but as always, I do want to take a minute to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Kathy All. She is an Edward Jones certified financial planner. Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And once again, I'd like to welcome back Rob Rice. Rob, thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
We are going to talk about local notice to mariners. Want to warn everybody up front, there are some links that are going to be important to this discussion. They will be in the video description on YouTube and in the episode notes in the true podcast audio only version. So just check those out. But before we jump into the topic, for those who maybe have not listened to one of these podcasts where you are a guest, Rob, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
So I've been boating for, I don't know, 20 years. I got started when my daughter got involved in a sailing program run by the local Girl Scout Council. I ended up as a sailing instructor. I managed or coordinated the whole program of instruction for that sailing program for several years. I'm still an instructor there. I teach sailing for them. I hold sailing instructor qualifications from the American Sailing Association, and I'm a boating safety instructor for the U.S. Coast Guard and for Texas Parks and Wildlife. I'm really involved in a lot of boating safety education things. I'm a member of the Coast Guard's unpaid volunteer component, the Coast Guard Auxiliary. It's a uniquely Coast Guard organization. So we're members of the Coast Guard. We're always unpaid. We're members of the Coast Guard, but in a different way from the military, active duty, and reserve component members because we're unpaid volunteers. There are a bunch of us, and the Coast Guard relies on us to do a wide range of things. Boating safety education and outreach to recreational boaters is a big part of the Coast Guard Auxiliary's mission set. Yeah. So this is kind of right up my alley.
Well, and AGLCA relies on the Coast Guard Auxiliary for a lot as well, because you do a lot of education, as you said. Our members take Coast Guard Auxiliary courses around the country. Coast Guard Auxiliary often teaches the basic boating safety course at our events and often does the vessel safety checks at our rendezvous. So we are appreciative for all that they do for us and for the boating community at large. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
You're also planning your own Great Loop, and that is your Great Loop boat behind you, Slow Dancing. When are you thinking you might start your own loop?
So our youngest kid is still in college. He will be a senior this next year. So we're going to wait until after he's completed. Hopefully we'll convince him to come home, babysit the house, and babysit the 85-pound German Shepherd for a year while we're gone. But it'll be after he gets done with college. So, it could be 2 years from now, maybe about the soonest we'd go probably. But that's, 18 months to 3 years from now, entirely possible, that sort of time range. I've done a pretty good chunk of the loop already in bringing the boat home after we bought her. So it was up north of St. Louis at Port Charles Harbor at the time we bought it. So I came down the Western Rivers, so did the whole Mississippi, Ohio, Tennessee, Tombigbee route into Mobile Bay, and then came across the Gulf ICW to get home to our home waters just in the Galveston Bay between Houston and Galveston. So a lot of cruising miles already, even though I haven't done the whole loop.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of loop miles and a lot of other miles too, taking that right turn towards Houston. But so we're going to talk about local notice to mariners today, LNM. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us what those are.
Okay, so local LNM is the local notice to mariner, and it's an official publication by the U.S. Coast Guard of important, timely, current information that the Coast Guard thinks that mariners, both commercial mariners and recreational mariners like loopers, might need to know to safely travel particular stretches of waterway. So it's an official U.S. Coast Guard publication, and it's pretty basic stuff. It could be things like a bridge that should open but is broken and doesn't open. So there's a bridge in the Galveston Bay area, a railroad bridge that's supposed to open. It at the moment doesn't. So that's shows up in the local notice to mariner. Or it could be things like a dredge is operating in a particular waterway. Be careful, and here's the contact info for how to reach the dredge. It's that sort of thing. Some of that information, but only some, gets broadcast by the Coast Guard in a broadcast notice. You'll hear the Coast Guard announce that on Channel 16 and say, to hear this broadcast notice to mariners, change to channel 1022 or 22 Alpha. And then they'll make a voice announcement of some information. Those broadcast notices are only a small slice of what's in the local Notice to Mariners publication. It's only the most pressing, immediate kind of things. There's a tree floating in the middle of the channel. That's the kind of thing that would show up in a broadcast notice to mariners.
Yeah. Well, so what is it about these that make them kind of more important than some of the other sources of information you might find about cruising?
Sure. So official, this is coming straight from the U.S. Coast Guard. So it's authoritative. It's the official stuff. It's very current. The Coast Guard updates the local notice to mariners database every 15 minutes. It's what I think of as actionable. This is stuff you need to know to plan, to correctly plan your journey. And it's stuff you want to know. It's local because you can drill down to a specific stretch of waterway, specific waterway and a specific stretch of waterway. So you could drill down to say, we'll talk about this in a minute, but you can now drill down in the local notice to mariners map-based website. Look only at the Tombigbee River and look only at like a 50-mile stretch of it. So I just want to know what's happening in this piece of the waterway. And mostly it's stuff that's not shown elsewhere. So this is not information that will necessarily show up in your chart plotter or in navigation apps, with one exception, and Aqua Maps is really outstanding here. And we'll talk a little bit more about Aqua Maps probably in a minute. But you can get this stuff in Aqua Maps.
Excellent. So that's a good explanation of kind of the things that we'll be seeing. You gave us some of the different kinds of info that you'll find in the LNM. Give us some real life examples of the types of issues that you'll find there that you perhaps, you need to know about, but if you hadn't checked, wouldn't have any idea what's
Right.
going on.
Okay, so for example, I can think of one that was yesterday, a railroad bridge, a swing bridge that if you have a tall boat, it has to open for us to go under it. If we were going to travel around Galveston Island yesterday or today, I would need to know that this railroad bridge is not opening. The opening mechanism is messed up, so I couldn't get in through that area. So that's one example. Another example, my wife and I have been talking about taking the boat out and going down the Texas coastline this summer. There are not locks, but there's some river gates which operate a lot like locks. One at the Colorado River and one at the Brazos River. The one at the Colorado River is under reconstruction. So when I checked the local notice to mariner, I discovered that lock is closed Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., completely closed to all traffic. If you're there after 5 p.m. or before 7 a.m., you can get through. And it's also open freely for all passing traffic on the weekend. So that tells me if we're going to go that direction, I want to go through the Gulf ICW, I need to plan my transit through that area to make sure we can get through that lock essentially on the day we're going to be there. Those are pretty good examples. I looked a couple of days ago in the Ohio River, for example, in an area where loopers are going to be. And there's a sunken boat at the edge of the channel that poses a navigation hazard. And so the LNM says, okay, there is this sunken boat at this particular mile. It's marked with a life ring and a small boat fender. It's at the edge of the channel, but you want to give it a wide berth so you don't run over it and hit the obstruction of this sunken boat. Those are some pretty good examples. When I was bringing my boat home post purchase, I checked the local notice to mariner and found that the Harvey lock in New Orleans was broken. So I had to reroute, and fortunately, there's a second lock that would get me where I needed to go. But I had to reroute myself to take advantage of a slightly different route to get through this other lock. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about.
Yeah. And you mentioned these are updated very frequently. They're current.
Yes. So the Coast Guard enters updates. They refresh the database every 15 minutes. So as stuff is learned by the Coast Guard, it gets entered into the database, and then it's essentially instantly available. It's the most current info you could get.
Yeah. So super helpful any day you are cruising the loop to be able to check the LNMs for the section that you're cruising in. I know there's been some recent changes to how you can obtain the information, how you can compile, how the information is compiled and delivered. So I want to jump into those, but let's take a quick break first and play a message from a sponsor. We'll come back and talk about, now that we understand why these are so helpful, how we get a hold of them. So we'll be back in a moment. Looking for dock space? Meet DockShare, the leader in private dock rentals and commonly referred to as the Airbnb for docks. DockShare connects boaters with property owners renting out their unused dock space. Whether you need short-term dockage or a long-term slip, DockShare has you covered. With over 90% of listings within 10 miles of the Great Loop, you'll find serene alternatives to crowded marinas, even in regions lacking public docks. It's easy. Search, message hosts, and book, all in one place. Visit dockshare.app today and discover your next docking destination. Port of Orillia in Ontario, Canada is at the center of your Canadian boater fun and the place you want to stop between the Trent and Severn waterway system to provision or simply enjoy this sunshine city where the weatherman is most often wrong. Whether it's dining, theater, casino, or museums you're after, we have it all, and we're the last chance before Georgian Bay for great city fun. At Port of Orillia, we have everything you need. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. Today, Rob Bryce is back with us. We are talking about local notice to mariner, LNM, and we've talked about what you'll find there, what kind of helpful cruising information, kind of almost required cruising information to be able to plan your route and know what challenges you might face. Let's talk about how we get these. So there's a few different ways. Go ahead and fill us in.
So I'd say there's really three main ways that you can get this info. One is you can subscribe to the LNM by email, and the Coast Guard will email you a local notice to mariners report once a week. That will be for, you can narrow it down somewhat to, like, for example, a particular river or a section of the Gulf of Mexico, that kind of thing. So there is a way to narrow it down somewhat. The great thing is it just shows up in your email inbox. It's a printout of the local notice to mariners report data that existed as of the time they generated the report, but it only comes once a week. So I think that's a good starting point. It's super easy. You just basically you go to the Coast Guard's website and find the waterway you're interested in. And look for the I want to subscribe to this by email button, basically. Enter in your email address and you're good to go. Starting point is you're going to Google USCG Local Notice to Mariners Home. That's the home page for the Local Notice to Mariners sort of system. There's a map of the U.S. and you sort of point and click from there to find the right area and then look for the link that says please subscribe to receive updates. Pretty straightforward. The hardest part is finding the right place to go and enter to get to this. So we're going to have the links in the program notes that go with this.
Yep, we'll put it right there. Yep. Okay.
So that's really good. It's fabulous because you're getting this stuff on a regular basis. Even if you don't think to do it daily, I think it's important to look at this, on a weekly basis if you're actively traveling.
Yeah. Any tips though, Rob, if you're looking at that weekly report, even if you have narrowed down to a certain area, it still can be a pretty lengthy report.
It can. So
And
mostly,
therefore a little bit cumbersome. So any tips for finding kind of the most pertinent information in that multi-page
sure.
report?
So there's going to be a lot of stuff that's not going to make a lot of sense that is very detailed, sort of technical information about buoys, markers, and lights that are either out of commission, in the wrong place, missing, or replaced, but in a new location. That stuff is probably harder for a recreational boater to sort of read, process, make sense of, and use actively. That info does show up in Aqua Maps, and that's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of Aqua Maps. I don't get a kickback from them, but I think they do a really good job of being very transparent about data and including the right, really important data if you have that, what is it, the Pro add-on subscription. Um, but you can, if you're looking at that report that you get emailed, you can look at the particular waterway you're interested in. So if you get a larger report, you can look and say, okay, I only want to know, I'm in the Ohio River, today, I need to know what's happening there. So you can jump to the section that's Ohio River, and then the important stuff will be listed by mile number, river mile number, for example, or in the ICW by the ICW mile number. That's probably the best way. And then it's sort of listed sequentially in mile order. So once you kind of figure out where you are and where that starts on the local notice to mariners printout, then you can sort of read down or up the list and sort of follow along what else you're likely to run into for that day's travel.
So, and there's also a subcategory that you can use to kind of
Yes,
drill down a little bit and perhaps rule out some of the information that is
right.
not pertinent to what you're doing.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. And one of the things, the kind of the simplest is you sort of scan through still till you start finding things with big blocks of text describing stuff. And it's the big blocks of text stuff that you really want to read. Like this thing, okay, the Colorado River locks are closed. Here's the open hours, that kind of thing.
mhm,
So some of that is under a heading called an additional marine safety information, additional MSI.
mhm.
Coast Guard loves acronyms. Uh, that kind of thing. So additional MSI typically is this most important sort of exceptional stuff that we're really interested in.
Yeah, those are great tips. And we mentioned that the email is a weekly report, but that the database
Yes,
is actually updated every 15 minutes. So
correct.
after we've kind of used the weekly report as a starting point, what's kind of a next step or another way to consume this data so that we've got the most accurate
Sure.
information?
The next option, next step is you go to the Coast Guard's map-based website, drill down to the waterway you're interested in, and generate your own report specific to the piece of the waterway you're interested in. That requires a little poking around to understand how their website works. We're on the second iteration of that website. They tried it 6 months ago. It was extremely cumbersome. They realized that wasn't going to work, so they took that one offline, reworked it. This one's better, but it's still not super obvious. There is a user guide. There's a link sort of at the top page of the website that says, here's the user guide. Absolutely, you need to read the user guide and then spend some time poking around. It's a little bit like Google Maps where you can point and click and scroll in and scroll out. There's a menu button at the top right of the map, and you have to click on that and choose an option that says load all LNM layers. Otherwise, you don't see the stuff on the map. Which is a little odd since the whole point is to show you the local notice to mariners stuff. But there are other kinds of data that you could look at if you were particularly interested in other kinds of data. And then from there, you can hit a button that says convert the data to basically to a table and then print it, and you can generate your own daily report that's specific to the area that you're traveling. You really do have to look at the user guide, otherwise it's probably not going to make any sense. You'll be really frustrated. And then you just need to spend some time poking around until you figure out how to make it work. Once you figure out how to make it work, it's okay. It's not as obvious as it should be, but once you get the hang of it, I think it's not bad. Not bad at all.
Yeah. And I think that the map based is probably more, even though it's a little bit cumbersome and you have to, understand what you're doing,
Right.
and it takes a little getting used to it. I think it's a little bit more modernized than the very long table, particularly for loopers who are going through new areas to them. And
Yes.
might not know all of the waterway names and the different river names and things
Yep.
like that. So, I think it is certainly an improvement, and it's a great way to get the data. And I know the Coast Guard has done a lot towards making that data accessible within other tools, and that's part of where the third way you suggest we obtain this information, and that's through Aqua Map.
Yeah. So I like Aqua Map a lot, and I like it because they are very transparent about where they get their data, how they get it, and when they update the charts. And these are things that you either don't know at all or only know little bits about with respect to most other navigational apps or the data in your chart plotter. So Aquamaps, what they do that's unique is the charts are pulled directly from NOAA's chart web database. So they pull the data electronically straight from NOAA. They update the charts in Aquamap within a business day or two after NOAA releases new charts. They pull, if you have the Aquamaps Pro add-on subscription, which is, I forget, 15, 20, $25. It's not a whole lot. Then you can also get the Coast Guard local notice to mariners data and have it show up directly in Aquamaps. Uh, Aquamap pulls the data directly from the Coast Guard database, and then it just shows up in Aquamap. And if there's a lock closure, there'll be an icon at the lock. You touch that, and it shows you the report of what the issue is at the lock. It's that sort of thing.
Mhm.
It also, you can also get ch changes to navigational aids, ATONs, markers, buoys, lights, that kind of thing. Other mapping systems don't update those aids to navigation frequently at all. Aquamap does if you have the add-on subscription. They're pulling those aid to navigation info directly out of the Coast Guard's electronic database and plugging it in and showing you the most current data in the app. So, for example, in my area of Galveston Bay, in the channel that leads from that I take out from the lake out to the bay, there's three buoys that were destroyed about 6 months ago and have been temporarily replaced by the Coast Guard, one of which is in a different location than NOAA has it, and two which are different characteristics. So they used to be a marker, so a signboard on a pole, and they're currently a buoy. One of them has a light, which is different than the light would be originally. Because Aquamap is pulling that data directly from the Coast Guard's database, it correctly shows the location and characteristics of those navigational aids. Some other commonly used charting tools don't, because they don't pull that Coast Guard data on a regular basis, like not at all regular.
Right. Okay.
So I think there's a lot to like about Aquamap.
Yeah, great. Those are some helpful information about what you're actually getting when you pay for that pro upgrade from Aquamap, and they are an AGLCA sponsor, so we certainly appreciate them and appreciate a plug for them. Um, Most loopers will do parts of Canada as part of their Great Loop. Does something similar to this U.S. Coast Guard notice to mariners, local notice to mariners. Is there a Canadian equivalent for that for the Canadian sections of the Great Loop?
There is. So Canada, our Canadian friends have a Canadian Coast Guard, which does much the same sort of thing as the U.S. Coast Guard. And the Canadian Coast Guard publishes similar data, two kinds of things. One is a notice to mariners, not Mars, and the other navigational warnings, NAVWARNs. You can get them from the Canadian Coast Guard website in similar kinds of ways that you can get them from the U.S. Coast Guard. And Aquamap pulls that data electronically and can display it if you choose. If you have the Pro add-on subscription and if you choose to buy that subscription. So there are lots of choices for charting apps. I'm a big fan of knowing where the data is coming from and understanding when it's updated and how, and whether I can rely on that data to be current and complete. I think Aqua Map does a good job of that. I have questions about other sources. The hardest one is really your chart plotter, your marine chart plotter, because almost nobody updates
Right.
that device frequently because it's generally difficult to update the charts. And I think there are questions about how well the chart plotter manufacturers do about updating that data on any kind of regular basis.
Yeah, and I agree that most loopers are using tablet navigation as a supplement, if not kind of as the primary with their chart plotter as a supplement now, because just the nature of the software keeps everything up to date very
Yeah,
nicely.
right.
So we've got a list of links that we'll put, as I said, in the show
Yes.
notes. Any other points that we maybe have not covered that you want to get out there about the local notice to mariners?
I think we've got it. So I really encourage loopers to spend some time poking around in the Coast Guard's map-based website, figure out how to generate a report for your home waters if you haven't started yet, for your home waters, and look at that on a regular basis just to get a feel for what the info is, and for the kinds of things you can expect to see there, and to be ready to use this resource to help you navigate safely.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then, yeah, once you're underway, I would subscribe by email to the report, and so you get at least that weekly baseline of info. Um, but I would also definitely, I highly recommend looking at the report every day before you start out, just to make sure there are no surprises. Like when I was going through New Orleans, and there was the main route through New Orleans through the Harvey Lock was closed. It was like, okay, well, I need to know that before I set out, because I need to go left instead of going right at this particular juncture. And if I got to the Harvey Lock and didn't know it was closed, I was going to be unhappy because I was going to have to turn around and go back and reroute myself.
Yeah, I think you said the key phrase right there, Rob. No surprises. I am
Yeah,
a big fan of no surprises while
yeah, you
cruising.
don't
I'd
want
rather know
surprises
what
on.
I'm going to be dealing with. So that's really helpful. And for those of you who are still planning, this is a great way to kind of get engaged. A lot of people are looking for how can I start to hone my skills even if I don't have the boat or I'm not on the water yet, and just starting to review these and see the types of things you'll be dealing with and understand, what you're accessing on a regular basis is helpful. So Rob, I think this was a great topic. Appreciate you suggesting it to me. Keep them coming because we're always looking for new topics for Great Loop Radio here. And thanks for once again joining us and sharing all of the details.
Glad to be here.
And thanks to everyone who's watched or listened today. We'll be back again next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.